Welcome to Evolved Sun. I'm your host, Matt Finch. In this episode, we're going to talk about service to others from the raw contact. I've done many previous episodes on the raw material, the Law of One, LL Research, Kuo, and others, and what the Law of One says about third density. Here we are on planet Earth, and this density is the density of choice. There is a choice to be made for each individual of whether they're going to serve the Creator by serving others or by serving themselves. So in this episode, we're going to cover service to others, what that looks like, and then coming up soon, we'll do another episode on the service to self path. Today I'm going to use as a resource a book written by Gary Bean and Diana Roy with LL Research. This book is called The Raw Contact Resource Series, a concept guide. I've read every book by LL Research, and this is one of my favorite ones. It's a really helpful resource guide. It's got sections throughout the whole book in alphabetical order from A to Z on all of the main concepts discussed in the raw contact, such as service to self, service to others, the choice, densities, free will, and much, much more. So let's go into it. Quote, service to others. In the course of third density, there's a choice to make regarding how one will love, how one will serve, and how one will relate to the free will of self and others. This choice determines whether one will absorb the energy of others for selfish gain or radiate to others in free giving. Of these two available choices, the Confederation calls the positive or right-hand path service to others. This path and its counterpart, service to self, first diverge from one another on their respective relationship to free will. The student of the positive polarity undertakes a long journey to polarize their consciousness in service to others. As they advance along the road of polarity, the chief recurring question facing them is a question of free will. The green ray activated being will have one type of understanding with regard to that question, the blue ray another, the self who is balanced in both of those rays yet another. The defining common foundation of their perspectives is the positive polarity's respect for free will. Service to others, STO, entities seek to recognize, honor, and support the free will of other selves, universally and unconditionally as the path progresses. Some of the basic questions that inform this respect of free will reflect an ever-deepening empathy. What is it like to be you? What is it that you need? How may I appropriately identify that need? And, whether intuited or articulated, how may I respond to that need? The positive polarity increasingly recognizes the sovereignty of all beings, seeing that it is the sacred right of each other's self to author their own journey. In that light, the positive polarity seeks to support the choices of the other while never, insofar as circumstance makes possible, infringing upon their free will. Indeed, desire to avoid infringement defines the boundaries of the positive polarity's service. Out of a desire to avoid infringement of free will, those of the service to others path await the call for service, recognizing that service can be offered only insofar as it is requested. What constitutes a call to service? What is the best way to meet that call? These are the studies of a service to others entity as it advances through lifetimes and densities. In the following quote, Ra describes the general way that the conscious mind of the positive and negative path each relate to the resources of their respective subconscious minds. This dynamic also illustrates the way that the polarities relate to the free will of others. Service to others in practice. Practicing tolerance is integral to the positive path. In tolerance, one gives the other the space to be themselves and express themselves. But as one polarizes more positively, that high regard for free will opens the heart to seeing the Creator in the self and in the other, and to knowing these are one. And in that oneness is unconditional love, love that radiates, love that gives without expectation of return, love that melts the illusory conceptual boundaries of individual identity. The more one advances upon the positive path, and the more the blockages are removed from the heart, the more unconditional and universal that love becomes. This love also contains within it a sensitivity to suffering. How the service to others entity responds to suffering is something that evolves as they progress along the spiritual path. But at the base, there is a compassion for the suffering of others, coupled with a desire to help alleviate suffering on one level or another, whether through direct action, the beaming of love light, or, as we will examine, the radiation of self-realization. In the full consciousness of the green ray, it is understood that universal love freely given to other selves is more consequential and desirable than even the most well-intentioned rearrangement of social and political structures. The service to others entity can certainly do good work in politics, government, and social programs. It is just that how one serves, by radiating love, is more important than what one accomplishes in the name of service. It is impossible to help another being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness within the Creator from the Self, less important being information. Many beings upon the positive path grapple with concerns about selfishness, preferring to devote most of their attention to others. Ra reminds us, however, that it is appropriate to turn one's attention towards self-work when seeking to be of positive service. To aid the self in polarization towards love and light is to aid the planetary vibration. That is, the deeper one's conscious recognition of the self's unity with the Creator, a recognition that generally requires disciplined spiritual seeking over time, the greater the love and light one radiates to others. The best way of service to others is the constant attempt to seek to share the love of the Creator as it is known to the inner self. This involves self-knowledge and the ability to open the self to the other self without hesitation. This involves radiating that which is the essence or the heart of the mind-body-spirit complex. Be yourself, Ra says. You are the service. This is the service of being. And the more love you feel in your being, the more love effortlessly radiates from you. The more light you discover within, the more light effortlessly shines from you. Seen in the movement through the chakras, the lower energies are transmuted by the higher centers into freely given love-light radiation. But each entity has particular outer gifts and talents. Each self is unique. Each other self is unique. Each opportunity for service is doubly unique. In a creation of infinite variety, there are infinite ways to answer the call. The best way for each seeker in third density to be of service to others is unique to that mind-body-spirit complex. This means that that mind-body-spirit complex must then seek within itself the intelligence of its own discernment as to the way it may best serve other selves. This will be different for each. There is no best, there is no generalization, nothing is known. This is why the service to others path is one of empathy and deep listening. Now I'm going to skip ahead. There's actually a lot more information on service to others in this chapter, but I'm going to skip ahead to the end as this is just a basic overview video. So here we go. To polarize positively to a harvestable degree in third density, it is necessary to vibrate, as Ra defines it, in 51% service toward the welfare of others. Ra is not entirely clear on what precisely this measurement means, whether this is a measurement of intention, time, quality or strength of vibration, openness of the green ray, or something else. But what is clear is that purity is not a prerequisite for graduation from third density. Each seeker contains a ratio of the two polarities. Even those who achieve a harvestable degree of service to self polarity may have, by some measure, a remaining 5% of service to others within them. The goal is not totality but a bias of the consciousness in one direction or the other, each requiring will and faith. The more one activates, balances, and clears one energy system, the more light that flows through, radiating effortlessly outward. Before an entity lifts a finger or speaks a word, this is the service of being. With sufficient disciplined work, it is possible to awaken to a state of consciousness where service to others is automatic. Service to self. In the course of third density, there is a choice to make regarding how one will love, how one will serve, and how one will relate to the free will of self and others. This choice determines whether one will absorb the energy of others for selfish gain or radiate it to others in free giving. Of these two available choices, the Confederation calls the negative or left-hand path service to self. This path and its counterpart, service to others, first diverge from one another on their respective relationship to free will. Those of the negative polarity form a separation-based relationship to free will, concluding that the free will of the other self need not be respected, honored, valued, or supported. The other self, instead, is to be manipulated, exploited, controlled, and enslaved for the sole benefit of the self. The greater the enslavement, the more total the infringement, the more the negative entity moves forward upon its path of polarity. As the service to self entity progresses into higher densities, that orientation becomes even more pure, to the extent that they reject completely the concept of other selves' free will. This polarized relationship to free will is seen in terms of that which prompts the service for each polarity. Positive entities await the call or request before offering their service. Negative entities do not await the request, but instead call themselves to service. The negative service, however, looks very different from the positive. Recall that Ra named the negative polarity service to self. The negative entity is not asking, "What can I do to meet your need and contribute to your empowerment?" but is instead asking, "How can I use you to enhance myself? How can I gain your power or your money, property, status, or your obligated obedient servitude?" This is a model of opportunism wherein those of the negative polarity will infringe whenever they feel it possible and to their benefit. In this model, all means, including gross deceit, are fair game. Whereas Ra describes the positive polarity as energetically radiant, they describe the negative polarity as energetically absorptive. This is not an absorption that simply receives what is given, but one that seeks to take what is not, at least consciously or knowingly, offered. What is taken? Principally the power of other selves through infringement upon their free will. That infringement growing more powerful, skilled, and subtle as the negative being advances in the densities. The more that the higher density negative entity can deceive the other self into surrendering their will, the more strongly polarized it becomes. Service to self and the veil. Both the positive and negative polarities awaken to their paths in a third density environment of separation, where the conscious mind is veiled, separated from the subconscious mind. But whereas the positive polarity seeks to lessen and see through separation, the negative polarity seeks power through intensifying separation. The first separation, as Ra says, is of the self from the self. The negative polarity sees the conscious self as separate, distinct from, and above all else, including its own subconscious resources. From this standpoint, no effort is made to seek guidance from the greater or higher self, much less other selves who may be viewed as non-entities, slaves, personal possessions, or completely without status. Separation and disregard for free will depend heavily upon the veil. In the veiled environment, the closing of the heart both causes and sustains the negative point of view. If you see the energy centers in their various colors completing the spectrum, you may see that the service to self-choice is one which denies the very center of the spectrum, that being universal love. Therefore, all that is built upon the penetration of the light of harvestable quality by such entities is based upon an omission. This omission shall manifest in fourth density as the love of self, that is, the fullest expression of the orange and yellow energy centers, which then are used to potentiate communication and adepthood. The veiling process is that which is a portion of the third density experience. Service to self in practice, control versus acceptance. If there are two words that most concisely describe the polarities in their attempts to promote either separation or unification, they are control in the former and acceptance in the latter. How these two energies diverge is a subject that seekers of both paths will explore through many lifetimes. We will only briefly examine how control on the service to self path is the diametrical opposite of acceptance. The positive path, the path of acceptance, is also called the path of that which is. The journey, then, is a progressive discovery of what is, which is also to say, a progressive releasing of resistance, removing blockage to what is. To rediscover what is, each facet of the self and the creation is seen, is brought into the heart, and is deeply accepted. The negative entity does not accept the present as it manifests, and therefore desires literally to control the creation, to rule, to manipulate, to bend all people and all things to its individual will. This is exercised not with the intention to empower, serve, and heal others by honoring their own divinity, but to dominate, enslave, and strip the status of others, thereby acquiring their power for the individual self. Insofar as possible, acceptance attempts to accept the free will of all things. Control, insofar as is possible, attempts to commandeer the free will of all things. The negatively oriented entity will program for maximal separation from and control over all those things and conscious entities which it perceives as being other than the self. The negative will use the three lower centers for separation from and control over others by sexual means, by personal assertion, and by action in your societies. The negative entity beholds the universe, other selves included, as that which shall be put in order, not an order which seeks to understand and cooperate with the inherent order of intelligent energy, but one envisioned and imposed by the individual. The negative construct is elitist. It is a dominator hierarchy in which those on the upper rungs suppress the free will of every rung below, bending, manipulating, and enslaving others to serve the self, and disharmony results. The ability to polarize negatively requires an enormously strong will and self-discipline, for the negative entity is omitting the springboard of the green ray and using the deepest negative manifestations of red, orange, yellow rays to contact intelligent infinity. The negative polarity illustrates the path of separation. Instead of surrendering the personal will to the intelligent order of the universe, it aims to impose order through control, first and foremost upon the self. This creates a situation whereby, as the service to self entity polarizes more purely, it is not seeking external help or guidance from its higher self or other guides. The service to self-oriented entity will look to the situation for a path that offers the increase of personal power. Truth and honesty are valued only insofar as they serve this end. Eventually, service to self, as with service to others, will abandon its polarity to embrace the balance of love-light, light-love in the unity of sixth density. Alright, and that concludes this episode. There's actually several more pages in this concept guide on the service to self path. I find it very fascinating. It seems to me that it would be so hard to graduate to fourth density as a service to self polarizer. But if you look at the global situation right now, it's easy to see that service to self humans appear to be ruling the world, while at the same time disguising things so the general public thinks that these elites, these controllers, are actually wanting our best interest. According to this service to self section of the book, it seems like all they're doing is using the classic service to self strategies for them to increase their personal power and control and domination and enslavement of the human race to their will. And that's going to conclude our series on the service to others and service to self, paths of polarity. To a quick review, we are in third density right now, the density of making the choice. Everyone incarnate on Earth right now. If they don't want to get stuck in the reincarnation cycle in Earth or another third density planet, we need to choose one of the paths of polarity, either service to self or service to others. And I suspect everybody following this Evolved Sun channel has either already made the decision to be of service to others or is on their way to making that decision. Because if we don't make either decision, that leaves us in what Ra calls the sinkhole of indifference. And that means that by the end of our physical incarnation, we won't graduate to fourth density negative or fourth density positive. And since Earth is going to fourth density positive, that means that we'll just have to go reincarnate somewhere else on another third density planet for another approximate 76,000 year cycle, learning the same lessons over and over again, playing the same game. And with that being said, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.